Right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's good to see you all. All right, we're going to make this a high energy Sunday. You guys ready? Everyone's got to jolt up on some caffeine here. All right, let's rock and roll. I have H2O. I figure that's the perfect blend of herbs and spices. All right, good morning. Hey, good morning. Welcome. All right. It's great to see everybody, both in person and online. Fran, Lynn, Andrea, David, Joy, Tony, and others. Welcome. And of course, our in-person crew. Welcome. It's great to see you all this morning. All right. This is Kabbalah Cafe. And today, they tell me, is Super Bowl Sunday. Yeah?
It is.
It is Super Bowl Sunday. All right. So who's got money on the game? I'm kidding. So
I like the commercials. That's the best.
what's interesting about the commercials as we get this Kabbalah class started is the following. It used to be that if you wanted to see the commercials, you had to watch the game. It was like now they release the commercials beforehand. I guess they want to get their money's worth. So, you create a spot, you buy so much money. Create a spot that costs, you buy the space that costs so much money. I guess you want to get your money's worth. Anyway, very special weekend because right now there are several thousand Chabad Shluchos, Rebbitzins, up in New York at the annual Kinus HaShluchos, the Chabad Women's Shluchos Conference. And that's going on this weekend. My wife is up there. Wait a second, where are my kids? They're safe and sound. And so that is going on. And it's, I think, very appropriate that we're speaking about a topic that relates specifically to the way the mystics refer to it as feminine energy. And our topic today is women's intuition. So the first thing I want to do is get a working definition of what is intuition. And to do that, I turn to you.
Where do you want to go? Here or there?
I don't have a good definition for intuition. What do you all have as far as intuition?
And you can tell me whether you can hear this, otherwise we can do it on the...
Okay, tell me intuition.
A little voice.
A little voice. Ooh, I like that. Okay, a little voice. Where's the voice coming from? Is it your head or is it not your head? Something beyond? Divine, okay. What else?
Gut feeling.
Gut feeling, okay, good.
Yeah.
Gut feeling.
It's also being able to relate to another person and be empathetic.
So you're saying there's a little empathy going on over there? Okay. What else? Intuition. Sixth sense. Good. Sixth Sense. Wasn't that a movie? Was that a movie? With M. Night Shyamalan, that guy? Yeah. Sixth Sense. Yeah. Okay, good. What else? Intuition. What comes to mind? A hunch. Good. Intuition is like, I'm betting that the opening coin toss, because we like to connect things here, there's going to be tails. People do that. Yeah. I call them prop bets. You know this, right? In the Super Bowl and all, like there are prop bets. Could be the Kabbalah of wagering also today. It doesn't matter. The point is that people put down money on the opening coin toss, who will score first, how they'll score, how long the national anthem will go for. There's an over-under on that. Like how many seconds will it take? People put down real money on this. It's like you would think I was kidding, but you know that I'm not.
Well, that sounds more like foolishness.
In fact, I will tell you, but one second. But if you ask them, why'd you pick heads? Why tails? It's an intuition. It's a gut feeling. There's no science behind that. People are spending collectively millions of dollars on the opening coin toss, on betting whether it's going to be head or tails. Where's that coming from? Mele, I'm going to use either short. Mele, which means tell me that you're betting on the outcome of the game. You can break it down. You could say, this team, that team, offense, defense, special. You could break down the science, as it were. The coin toss, there's no science behind that. What are you going to look at? Like the last 50 years of coin tosses, I don't know, I think we're playing in Arizona, Right? What is going on with the desert conditions? Who's the referee that's flipping it? How many times has he flipped? I mean, seriously, what's the science behind it? So it's in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't this state that?
You're saying 50-50.
Yeah, it's 50% odds you'll win.
Right.
It's pretty good odds.
That's better than roulette.
Yeah.
Because they have the black, don't ask how I know this, right? They have also those spaces
No.
that no one wins. The house,
Yeah.
therefore, has a little bit over 50% chance. That's what they teach you in Chabad schools. What do you mean? In Chabad yeshivas, you have to learn like how Vegas operates, just in case. Just in case it's a life and death situation. You got to know how to operate in these situations. But here's the point. Good morning. The point is that if somebody says, I'm putting down big money on the coin toss in today's game, that is a hunch, that is a gut feeling, that is intuition, that is not logical, that's coming from another place. A divine voice, as it were. God told me to put $1 million on tails, right? I mean, like, that's what that would look like, which leads us into the conversation. So what is intuition? But more importantly, where does it come from? Where does intuition, have a seat. Where does intuition come from? And is there a way to open up the channel of intuition to be more intuitive, right? Isn't that the word, intuitive?
Mm-hmm.
And isn't being intuitive a good thing? That'd be great. To intuit, not inuit. I think that's
different.
yeah, right. That's in Alaska. But to intuit, right? Not quick hooks either, but intuit, to know so many things that are related. To know davar mitoch davar, something from something else, to be able to see things that maybe other people don't see, or to feel things that other people don't feel. That's intuition. Which means, here's my definition of intuition. Intuition is when you know without your head.
Without
Your head. In other words, you're knowing not from a place of logic, not from a place of seichel, because then you would say, I know, not I have an intuition. Intuition is knowing, but it's knowing. It's not knowing, it's knowing from a place beyond just your head. To understand this, let's look at how Kabbalah describes the soul. Chamisha Shemot Nikra La. It says in Kabbalah that she, the soul, is called by 5 names. The soul has 5 names. And what are those 5 names? Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. Those are the 5 names. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. Let's define them. Or let's translate them first and then we'll define them. Nefesh. Okay, so these are 5 names of the soul. So watch how we do this. What's nefesh? Soul. Great. Doesn't really help us. Nefesh is the lowest dimension of soul. I'm going to explain that soon in a moment. Ruach means spirit. Okay, at least we have a different word, right? Nefesh, soul, ruach, spirit. Neshama, oh man, we're back to soul again. Everyone uses that. Everyone uses the definition of soul for neshama. All right, so soul, spirit, soul. Again, English is not going to really help us here. Chaya means life. Yechida means Yechida.
that's one I haven't heard. So
It's oneness, more than oneness. It's like Yachid, singularity. Singular. Remember that wireless company? That used to be AT&T, that is now back to AT&T?
That would sit with a C.
Yes, that was with a C. I had Singular. I loved Singular. Rollover minutes. It was fantastic. It was fantastic. I accumulated thousands of rollover minutes. Why? I don't even know. I mean, I know why, because I didn't use them.
Yeah.
But what would I use them for? No idea. And then they rolled out unlimited plans. Remember when it was nights and weekends? Who remembers that? I bought a cell phone, and then you bought like a certain tier, but nights and weekends were unlimited. It's great. All night talking to people. It's like, hey, I got free calling. It's not free because you're paying for it, but whatever. You just think of it as free. It's one of those things. All right, back to our story. So Yechida is singularity. So let's describe, so that's the definition. But definitions don't work. When you're translating Hebrew, especially when you're translating Kabbalah, if you just give a definition of the word, definitions don't work. To translate it, what does it mean? What is nefesh? What's ruach? What's neshama? What's chaya? What's yechida? So here's the first thing I want to tell you. That when you have these 5 dimensions, the way it's broken down in Kabbalah is 3 and 2. So nefesh, ruach, and neshama are grouped together. Those 3, the lower 3 dimensions of the soul, are always grouped together. And the acronym is Naran. I'm gonna let you in on like if you're a Kabbalist, you're not gonna say nefesh, ruach, Naran. Boom. Nefesh, ruach, neshama. Naran. The higher 2 dimensions, chaya yechida, the acronym is chai, right? Chaya yechida, ches and yud, chai. So naran chai, those are the 5 dimensions of the soul. And they're divided in those 2 ways. Naran, the 3 lower, and then the 2 higher. So what are these 3? What are the 2? How do they work together? And what's going on? Let's break it down. So nefesh, we're starting from the bottom. The soul does many different things for the person. On the most basic level, the soul provides animation. You have a body, right? A body that is just there, right? You have a body that has all the parts, has all the, all the stuff, a torso, a head, arms, legs, right? All the stuff, but it's not moving. We call that when a body's not moving? Dead, a corpse.
I didn't want to say it.
When it's alive, we say it's alive. Or Frankenstein, it's alive, or however that was expressed. So life means more than a body. It means an energy force, an energy flowing through that body to animate it. The basic force or flow of animation is coming from the soul on the dimension of nefesh. In other words, the lowest dimension, the most basic elementary level of the soul is the part of the soul that provides a battery pack for the body. Animation. It's like you plug in that coffee machine. Did that work? Coffee worked. Everything's working fine. Okay, great. Fantastic. So plug in the coffee. So it's not plugged in. It's not going to work. You plug it in, power button. Next thing you know, I don't know if it does that. Whatever. It's on. It's alive. The nefesh of the soul is the part of the soul that provides animation for the body. It's the part that the mystics say flows through the blood of the person. Not that the soul is in the blood, but the blood represents the blood that's circulating. A heart that's pumping represents life. So the lowest dimension, the nefesh of the soul, is providing baseline animation, life, vitality. You with me so far? Ruach, next level up. Ruach provides emotional feeling for the person. So not only are you alive, but you can also feel. You can feel emotions. Emotions stem from the soul on the next level up, which is called ruach, spirit. It's a spirit of emotional animation. It's not animation. It's now an emotional experience or an emotional world, an emotional universe that a person has access to within themselves. Animals absolutely have ruach. Yes. Sorry? Yeah, animals are very emotive, very emotional. You can feel the love of an animal. You can absolutely, we should never experience this, but also experience or confront the anger of an animal. Animals are definitely emotive, more emotive. Well, I don't know if I want to rank more or less than human beings, but human beings have something that animals don't have, which is such a powerful, which is the next level up, neshama, which we'll get to in a second, such a powerful cognition and the ability, therefore, to restrain the emotion, the instinctual emotion. like if a lion is hungry and like really hungry, like savagely hungry, and then you put like I don't know, a deer, a buck in front of it, right? Remind me to tell you guys a story about a buck. So you put a buck in front of it, so the lion is going to tear it apart and eat it. The lion will not say, I know I'm hungry. However, what about this buck's poor family? Right? What about, yeah, huh? Or, oh yeah, or you know what? I'm hungry, but it's okay. It's okay. I'm cutting back. It's February. Yeah, it's February. This is, February is, I'm holding back on buck. I'm going sushi. Whatever. I'd rather have a salad. Now, human beings don't always do that either. In other words, sometimes we pounce. Oftentimes we pounce. But we have the possibility of not pouncing. Animals don't, and we don't hold it against them. Wait, remember Siegfried and Roy?
Yes.
Roy got attacked on stage. Roy Horn got attacked on stage by one of those white, majestic tigers.
Yeah.
Right? Remember that?
Mhm.
Savagely attacked. He almost died, and eventually he was paralyzed and died some years later. Till this day, we don't know what happened. I say we. I'm part of the investigative team. Until this day, it's not known exactly what happened. How do I know this? Because I listened to a podcast where they went through it. No, okay, but I'm not kidding. Anyway, but till today, it's not exactly clear what set that tiger off.
Yeah.
But it's like the story of the Rambam, where the Rambam, Maimonides, was very connected with academic circles, because he was a philosopher and a physician. He was like, he had friends in high places, thinkers. And there was a guy that he was friends with. And this fellow philosopher believed that animals could be as intelligent as human beings if you just put in enough effort. He said, and Maimonides says, no, there's a fundamental chasm between humans and animals. And although animals have traits that are human-esque, there's still ultimately something that animals don't have that human beings have intellectually. And this man said, I don't believe it. I disagree with you. And to prove it, I'm going to invite you to a banquet in 1 month's time. He invites him to this banquet. Maimonides shows up. And there at the banquet, there are waiters serving the food. And as the story goes, as the story has been told to me, and as I've read it, at the banquet, who is carrying the food? Cats. There are cats, not Yankel cats, but like, right, the animal cats, right? Standing on hind legs, little paw carrying little hors d'oeuvres and walking around serving food. As the story goes, Maimonides says, and his buddy, his fellow philosopher says, oh, you see, look, with enough training, cats can also be waiters. Maimonides says, very good. Very good. And then he pulls out of his pocket a mouse in a box. It was in a box. Not so weird. Still weird. And he pulls out maybe he was tipped off that, or he told them, like, I'm going to train animals, cats. Pulls out a mouse. He released it on the floor. What do you think the cats did? Cats did, huh? They dropped the food and they ran after the mouse. You can train an animal, but you're not going to transform the animal fundamentally. Human beings, at least there's a shot. At least we're working on it. There's a possibility, which takes me to neshama. By the way, I said buck, and I said, remind me to tell a story. I'll remind myself. So there was a young boy who was who was at the threshold of his bar mitzvah. It was the night before his 13th birthday. And his parents were curious. He was a good boy. Parents were curious as to which path in life he would take. So that night, while he was sleeping, they put on the kitchen table, they put 3 items. They put a bottle of booze, of alcohol. They put a Bible, and they put $100. And they figured they'll put it on the kitchen table, leave it, no notes or anything. They'll see that morning of his bar mitzvah, 13th birthday, what's he going to grab? If he grabs the money, he'll be a businessman. If he grabs the Bible, he'll be a rabbi. If he grabs the booze, all right, now we have to be careful. What happens? And his parents are secretly watching in the morning. And so the kid walks over, is getting ready for school, sees the stuff on the table, money, grabs the 100, puts it in his pocket, takes the alcohol, pours himself a shot and drinks it, then grabs the Bible, puts it under his arm and walks out. His parents look at each other and say, oh boy, he's going to be a Chabad rabbi. He's going to be a Chabad rabbi. All right. That's the story with the buck or the $100. All right. If you know, you know. Now, back to our story. So nefesh is animation, biological function. The body doesn't, just to be very clear here, the body doesn't power itself. How do we know this? Because we've all seen, unfortunately, what a body that no longer is alive looks like. The body doesn't self-power. There's an external source that powers, that provides, like a watch, right? There's a battery, there's a force. So that's nefesh. The lowest level is animation, energy, battery. Ruach is emotion. Neshama, nefesh, ruach, neshama. Neshama is intelligence. Now, animals also have intelligence, but human intelligence is on a different level. One of the ways in which human intelligence is on a different level is the way that there's different ways to frame that understanding or to conceptualize that. Creative thinking and imagination and curiosity. There's different ways to understand it, but even on a basic level, the way I framed it before, I think is helpful. And that is that human beings have the ability with the mind, moach shalit al halev. The mind has the innate ability within a human being to rule, to guide, to control the heart. It's a favorite phrase in Tanya. Moach shalit al halev. The mind can control the heart. Doesn't mean that we always exercise the power, but we have the power. A human being has the power to be in control. You're telling me that somebody literally cannot control themselves, doesn't have that control. I guess it's possible in certain scenarios or whatever it is, it's possible. But by and large, the default setting on a human being is that that their mind is stronger than the heart if they choose to exercise that control. It's like the example. If you want to have a visual, it's like if you have a dog and you're walking your dog. So there you are walking your dog. Then you have another scenario where your dog is walking you. You ever see that? That's where the person is like running after the dog, right? So it's in any moment, in any situation, for every individual, there might be a different temperature of how hot their emotions are and how cool their intelligence is, and that can create different results. But by and large, a person innately has the ability to govern their heart and thus temper. Again, temper their emotions, and instincts. But it doesn't mean that it's always going to work out like that, because we can choose to allow the heart to go out. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling frustrated. I don't like what you did or what you said. I don't mind. So then I'm gonna tell you about it. If I let myself go, that's what happens. But I can choose also to say nothing. What does that look like? I don't know. Counting to 10,000. What else does that look like? Walking out, like stepping out of the room, whatever it looks like. It doesn't matter how but the point is that innately we do have the ability. Moach shalit al halev, the mind can control the heart. Where does cerebral power, where does that intelligence, the human intelligence come from? It's the third level of the soul, neshama. So nefesh is basic biological life animation. Ruach is the emotional disposition, or the emotional possibility and ability within a person, and neshama is intelligence. Now that all of that is easy. Now we're going to go to the next two. Now, remember I told you that the lower three are grouped together because that's all like physical stuff. And the higher two, that's where things get really interesting. Chaya and Yechida. Now, Chaya and Yechida are referred to in Kabbalah as the transcendent dimensions of the soul. You see, the other three are how the soul operates in the body. So animation is working through the body. Emotions are felt in the body. Intelligence is, again, operating in the mind and the body. But Chaya and Yechida are higher than the body. Chaya is, there's different ways to explain it. I'll give you one angle on this, the way that I can relate to it. Chaya is the vision of the soul that is above the body. If that makes sense. It's the soul's vision, not limited to the container of the body. So I think I need to explain, because that's the way I think of it in my head, but let me explain it so that the concept is clear. Typically, we understand things based on our senses. And right, so in other words, we have a brain inside our head, right? And how does our brain know? How do we gain information? Literally through the holes in our head, based on what we see and hear and otherwise experience with our senses. Does that make sense? I guess the only thing that's not in the head is touch. But otherwise, it's like, imagine, it's like you have the brain inside your skull that can absorb information, and then you have holes in which, it's kind of literally, right? Where the outside stimuli are able to pass through and come inside to then be processed and understood by the brain. But that's how the mind and intelligence, which is the third level of the soul, operates inside the body. The soul itself, though, the totality of the soul is not inside the body. There are two dimensions, Chai and Yechida, that stand above the body. And it doesn't mean that when you're standing up, it's like hovering over your head. It might still be inside you, but it's not limited by you. It's not trapped inside you. It's not limited to your bodily experiences. It doesn't only know by virtue of what you've seen or heard or read or experienced on a physical level. It knows on a higher level of knowing.
That's consciousness.
Define what you mean by consciousness.
Not sensory, because the sensory is in the body.
Right.
And the fact that you can have thought.
The fact that you can produce thoughts like that. Okay, so that's
Actually, thinking that's not physical.
So there's really two things. There's the thinking that's not necessarily bound by the physical, but it's going to be influenced by the experience. In other words, we're thinking, even when we think abstractly, it's always going to, typically, by and large, it's going to be influenced by what we've experienced. Like, try to imagine something that is unimaginable. You can't even, like, even science fiction, that things outside the box or whatever, it's always like tethered to our reality, what we know, right? Like, Martians will look like this, whatever, right? Like UFO balloons flying through Alaska from China will look like this, right? Whatever, the whole thing. But it's I always find it interesting, like, it's always tied back, right? We're not really thinking outside the box. Because we don't even know what to imagine, because we're so grounded in this experience. But there is, so in Kabbalah, it's actually in our text. That's referred to as, what you're talking about is referred to as the koach hamaskil, the power of intelligence that can generate new ideas and generate thoughts, but it's still grounded a little bit, still tethered in our experience. What I'm referring to is the soul's vision, not even knowledge, but vision that exists outside of our experience. It's kind of like, imagine, I don't know, this is gonna be weird. Imagine a creature inside this cup. I don't know. So, right, and then it's just stuck inside the cup. So when it looks around, it just sees the walls of the cup, right? Unless there's some holes in it, and then it can see through the walls of the cup. But imagine if we're able to somehow peer above the lid, right? Imagine if we could peer above the, lid, whatever, above the lip of the cup, the top of the cup, and see a vista of reality that's not stuck in the here and now. The soul is not of this world, and therefore the soul has a deeper connection and a deeper vision, or a transcendent vision beyond what we can see normally. So the soul sees spirituality, the soul sees godliness, the soul sees things and truths and realities that we simply cannot see. And the soul sees it, this is the way I explain it about the soul, that dimension of the soul sees it, and then it trickles down into the soul that's in our conscious body. And that's where, on one level, intuition comes from, which is the soul seeing something that we didn't see, that we don't know on our own. The soul of the higher level of the soul sees it and somehow informs, because all the 5 dimensions of the soul are connected to each other. So that higher level of the soul sees it, and then it trickles down into the lower conscious levels. And then we have, oh, I think this, or I think that, or my gut tells me this, my gut tells me that. Where's that coming from? It's not coming necessarily. I mean, it could come from many different places, but it might come from this chaya, this level of soul vision, which is beyond what's stuck inside of us. Does that make sense? And then you have Yechida. Yechida is the highest level. Yechida is the level of the soul that doesn't just see godliness, but it is a part of godliness, a part of God. Now, I know we always say the soul is a part of God, right? Okay, sure. But the soul is also part of us and very much tethered to our experience. Well, what I'm referring to now, this highest dimension of the soul, is a part of the soul that's currently in that state of constant connection with God, as it's also somehow the source of the lower levels of the soul that are then connected with us. The highest level of the soul, called Yechida, is like Yachid, singular. Hashem Echad, right? And so it's the oneness between that's the soul and God. So for example, the mystics explain that's where the capacity for self-sacrifice comes from. Self-sacrifice, which doesn't make sense. Like, why would I give up my life for my belief? Like, how does that make sense? Self-preservation, the lower levels of the soul are all about self-preservation. Biology, emotion, intelligence, but it's all about me living. It's this highest dimension of the soul that's connected with God, that feels God more innately than feels us, that has the capacity to transcend this earthly life and make the ultimate sacrifice. Not, by the way, just to clarify, not that Judaism is all about that. Judaism doesn't advocate for martyrdom and that sort of thing as a goal. If necessary, okay, it is what it is, but it's not an aspiration. Nonetheless, the capacity for that, which throughout our history, unfortunately, has been called upon many, many times, crusades, inquisitions, pogroms, Adadefas, Holocaust, etc. Right, many times throughout our history, Jews were put in that position of making the ultimate sacrifice. That comes from a part of the soul that's not rational, i.e., a part that's super rational, that is connected completely with God, and that's where that's coming from. That decision of, I cannot, on a physical level, sunder my connection with God, with my true essence, and thus I'm prepared to make that ultimate sacrifice of body so that my soul remains forever connected. So here's the point. 5 levels of the soul. Basic biological life and animation, emotion, intelligence, vision, the soul sees, and then the soul's essential connection with God. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida. So where does intuition come from? Intuition could come from any of the 2 higher levels. Typically, I believe that intuition is attributed to Chaya, to the level of the soul called Chaya. We all have that 4th dimension of the soul. We all have that transcendent dimension of the soul, which means that our soul, even as it's operating inside of our bodies, it's also seeing things that our minds don't even know. It's constantly seeing a reality of truth on a soul level, on a spiritual level, that we don't see through our eyes, we don't hear through our ears, and we don't taste through our mouth, like stuff that we don't otherwise have access to. And not all of it, but some of it trickles down. There is, the Talmud also says that there is a filter between those. The Talmud doesn't speak necessarily in the Kabbalistic language, but it does say that there is a bit of a filter between those higher dimensions of what we see, of what the soul sees, and what we consciously are aware of, for good reason. If we were consciously aware of everything out there, the spiritual dimensions out there, souls, angels, demons, etc., we would go meshuggah. In other words, if what our soul saw, if we were fully aware on the lower 3 dimensions of what our soul sees on the higher dimension, it would be TMI, as the kids like to say, right? I don't know. It's interesting. It may be that there's too much vision. It could be that there's too much. Anytime you have too much light, too much exposure, look, you need light, you need exposure, but too much of a good thing renders it not a good thing. My go-to example is film photography. Remember back in the day? canister of film, open it up, not open it up. Oh, don't do that. But you lead it out a little bit, close it up, 35 millimeter camera, advance it. Yeah, you have to advance it. I think so.
Yeah.
And what happens if in the middle of the roll, somebody comes over, pops the back open? The only way to get a photograph is by exposing it to light. Yeah, with the 1/60th of a second, whatever shutter speed. Give me a quick moment of light. Don't open it up. It's too much light. Too much light is not a good thing. Too much light is dangerous for your health. Too much exposure, too much awareness, not so good. But the soul, the Chaya Yechida, the Chaya Yechida, the higher levels of the soul, they see everything. Everything. They're not stuck. You see, we think, oh, this is it. This is all I got. Really? Not so fast. There are higher levels that know things that you don't know. But if I don't know it, then how do I know it? Because it's the higher part of you that you don't even know about. You don't know you, the full you. I don't mean you. I mean me also. We don't know us. We don't know the full. We're not full. The consciousness ends at neshama. Chai Yechid are part of us, but beyond our consciousness. So our soul sees, experiences, has a vision, or is part of something greater, something higher, but we're not aware of it. We're like, oh, football, wings, beer. That's all we see. And that's what our minds are filled with. However, once in a while, that vision trickles down. The higher vision of the soul trickles down. And suddenly we're like, wait a second. Something tells me. Don't know why I think this. Intuition, right? I'm getting this gut feeling. Getting this. I don't know how it's coming to me, but I'm feeling that X, Y, or Z. Sometimes it's not this level of intuition. Sometimes it's based on an algorithm. You've seen this happen before, and you've experienced the result. And so as it starts heading down that road, you're like, I think it's going to end up there. That's what we call today AI. It's not actual artificial intelligence. It's based on computing. You put in a lot of data, and it creates patterns, and then it can interpret the patterns early on enough, right? Early on. So sometimes intuition is that. It's not supernatural like this, like we're referring to. I don't mean supernatural. It's not like transcendent. But sometimes the intuition is coming from the higher vision of the soul. Yeah.
So do Kabbalists ever get into near-death experience? I was hovering above my body.
Yeah,
and I had
interesting.
burns in my body. I mean, was that something they wrote about at the time they wrote?
So here's a few things. I haven't really encountered a lot of that in the original texts. There is some discussion about experiences of, transcending, meditating and transcending. There's a lot of that stuff, but near death per se, not necessarily. However, that being said, Mrs. Nomi Freeman, who lives here, right? Nomi Freeman, Sri Freeman's wife. So she is a very well versed in near-death experiences, and she's done a lot of research, done a lot of interviews with people with that. There's a lot of she would be the person to speak to, because she would probably know the sources in Kabbalah that speak about that. So my answer to you is I've never studied that myself, but to your question, does that literature exist? I can connect you guys, but she would be the person to speak to find out.
She's at Emory?
No, she's here.
Oh,
She's here.
Steve Friedman.
Yeah, she's around the corner, as it were. But yeah, she would be a great person to speak to specifically about that topic. So yeah.
Was the guys who had the claim they take these drugs,
Mm-hmm.
LSD, whatever, they had minor off it.
Microdosing. It's all the rage.
sounds-
Revelation.
Yeah.
You think
Yes.
it's something that very-
So I'm going to repeat your question. So Sam is asking the question. So people that are going on trips, as it were, without a ticket, without. So is that channeling or tapping into that level of the soul, or is that just the brain kind of, creating an experience? The short answer to that is I have no idea. I have no idea. I can't speak from experience. I don't know. I'm not at all qualified to speak on that. Yeah. Yeah.
So you shaman
Right.
goes bad.
Yes.
Does all of this go?
What's fascinating is, so Sam's asking, when we pass away, what happens to these 5 levels of the soul? Kabbalah speaks extensively about it. The nefesh remains in the body on some level to keep it biologically intact, at least for a little bit. Kabbalah says that that's what I'm looking for. The decay, the decomposition of the body is tied into the, that's, yeah. So Kabbalah says that decomposition of the body is directly tied to the process by which the nefesh separates from the body. So as the nefesh disintegrates from the body itself disintegrates more and more. But it also discusses about how the higher dimensions of the soul return to the body and are present in the cemetery. And for the Shiva, it goes between the cemetery and the home, which is why ideally we sit Shiva in the home. There's a lot of powerful stuff in Kabbalah, exactly explaining all the 5 levels of the soul and what happens to them after. So your question is very much on point. I don't have it. I mean, I've studied it before and I've taught it before. I don't have it like sorted in my head right now because I haven't taught it in a little bit. But I can look it up again. But it's a fascinating topic as far as like where each of these levels go. I mean, they don't really go anywhere because it's not like spirituality is a spatial, is tied by spatial. It's not space bound. The luz, yeah. That just means that there's a part of the body in which the energy never leaves. And thus we believe it never decays, even if it's a tiny, tiny fragment that remains, but something remains of the original body. What's interesting is, according to that, the luz bone, first of all, we all have the luz bone. We're all losers.
That's the bone in the back.
Yeah. I thought that would be funnier in my head. Anyway, but yeah, the luz bone. The luz bone is, from our belief, is that the resurrection of the dead, the body will be regenerated from that bone, which means that we don't just believe that the soul is eternal. We believe on some level that even the body is eternal. That's trippy. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, science now, for sure. You're right. Science now is like, now Judaism makes sense. It's like, what you mean? You can take something from a body that existed and yeah. Hello, we're solving crimes from like 60 years ago. All you need is a little hair.
Actually, teeth are an excellent source because the pulp inside tends to be preserved.
Right.
Because it's encapsulated. So
how long does that last?
A long time.
Really?
Well, I mean, it's decomposing, but
slowly, right? You're saying
it's a valuable source of DNA, like the dental pulp.
Pulp free.
So when
Yeah.
phase of the body?
We get to choose. Okay. That's a very good question. Yeah. So when resurrection dead, which body do we get? What age? 20? All right. I can live with that. Wait, do we age after that? That's the next question. Do we age? Yeah.
Well, wouldn't you come back at the age you were when you passed away?
Grandmother died.
Mm.
But we never heard death was ever mentioned in front of her. He said, yeah, it's okay. She goes up to, she gets a new body and goes to live with Hashem.
Mm. Wow.
My question was, would you not be resurrected at the same age you were when you passed away?
Well, that wouldn't.
That's logical.
Mhm. I don't think it's interesting. It's discussed again, and I've studied it before. I don't have it on my fingertips. It's the nature of learning is, if you're not present. I don't want to share anything from memory that I'm not currently in. But I don't- Right. We're created at 20, at their strength. Right. I don't believe it is at the end. I don't believe it's at the end.
I remember you taught that the soul, the nefesh remains at the cemetery, sort of around the
Yes.
body.
Yes.
So how are we supposed to behave, or what's the significance of that for
Yeah.
loved ones? I mean,
What's interesting is, so the nefesh definitely remains around the cemetery. It's no longer animating the body from the inside, but it's in proximity.
right.
So around, when we visit a loved one in the cemetery or anyone in the cemetery, respect and love is the key. There is a Jewish tradition to avoid going to the cemetery numerous occasions in the first year after the passing. Not to go at all, but not to like go constantly. And one of the reasons in Kabbalah that's stated is because when we go, that we interface with the nefesh, and then it calls the other dimensions of the soul. And that soul is learning to leave, right? To it's getting used to its new reality, separating from the body. By calling it back, it's kind of like, it's making the journey again and again. It's like it's got to like, so we don't want to I don't know what the right word is. We don't want to like overdo it with our loved one in the first year. But after that, it's already more comfortable, so it can make the trip. Doesn't mean that if we go, by the way, it's a bad thing. It just says, if you're asking how often to go, how not often to go, but
It's very close to what. If you die, you go to go.
wow.
You go there. So what do you want to do?
Right.
You know,
There's no other, right. I can't, right. Yeah.
Rabbi,
Yeah. Alex, yeah.
is there a connection between the Luz bone and there's a place called Luz in the Torah? And
Yes.
what's the connection there?
I don't know. It says by Abraham that it was originally called Luz Shemir Karishana. I forget which city that was. What was that city? It's original. I don't know. I have to look that up. Is there a connection? I hesitate to say there's no connection because there's always connections, but I don't know. I don't know of the connection. Good question. All right. So back inside. We're back to the conversation. We'll get inside soon. So what we've established is that there are different dimensions of the soul, and the higher dimensions of the soul are the ones that we're not consciously aware of, even though they're very much a part of our reality, which means that our soul, the higher levels, constantly seeing things, but we're not aware of it constantly. It sees it, and then some trickles down to us. That's the way it works. Our soul sees it, and then it trickles down. The stuff that trickles down, we might call intuition, a sixth sense. It's like, I don't know where that came from. Premonition. Premonition is big. Dreams and premonition. Right? Well, how is it possible that sometimes we have dreams that are prophetic in nature? Right? Prophecy dreams, which is a genre of dreams. It's a biblical genre of dreams. Joseph has them. Pharaoh has them. The butler and the baker. The candlestick maker was sick that day. Okay. Yeah. They all have prophecy through dreams. So the dream prophecy is essentially, as Maimonides describes it, a vision. Right? We've been discussing this in our Wednesday JLI class, Booksmart. The prophets, Maimonides says, they had a vision, and then they interpreted and spoke it. So for them, there was a clear connection, the prophets, between the vision and their conscious mind. But we all of our souls are constantly seeing, because the Chai and Yechida are constantly operating, just like we're constantly moving. Our heart is beating, just like we're constantly feeling things, just like our mind is always thinking. Our soul above, when I say above, I don't mean like above in heaven. I mean like right here, but above our mind is always seeing. But it doesn't always hit our heads. We're not always aware of it, conscious of it. But sometimes we are. My question now is, so when does that happen? When does that happen? When does that information trickle down into our minds? I want to give you a life hack. You ready? Here's how Kabbalah explains it. The tighter our minds are, the less we're open to allow that information that we see to come down. Does that make sense? The more we try to control things in our heads, the more we make it about what I know and how I think, the more we're stuck here, the less we are open to allowing that higher vision or those other visions, those higher visions to come through. It's essentially like you think about Kabbalah says that a cup that's full, a full cup, cannot receive. Paradoxically, you think like a full cup is great. Yeah, the problem is if it's full, it can't take anything else, right? If our minds are full, when I say full, we're always thinking, but if our modality of being is that I know things and I can figure it out and I can use my head, if we're in our heads and we're working our head, like it's tight in our head, like our brains are right squeezing, then we're not relaxed. Like we're gripping on everything. Like I need to understand that. I need to make sense of it. I need to figure it out. The more we're trying to figure it out, the less apt we are to being able to see something outside of what's in our heads. We're just stuck inside. Yeah.
So how does Kabbalah explain or instruct you to open? Like now there's meditation and stuff, but what does Kabbalah say?
It's basically relaxing the mind through meditation. In Kabbalah, in Judaism, it's called hitbonenut, which means more of like bina, which is more of like opening the mind. Hitbonenut, hitbodedut is another form of meditation or meditation of solitude that's practiced. Like Breslov does that a lot. The Hasidic movement called Breslov, they do a lot of hitbodedut where you go outside into the forest and just you're in solitude and be one with the trees and be one with Hashem. But there are ways to relax: music, study. When I say study, I don't mean like study, but like study that allows meditation. People do breathing techniques. All of these are Jewishly sanctioned ways of opening the mind. But in general, the modality, if we were to, and this is we're gonna make full circle now, to compare and contrast. There's one more piece of the puzzle that I want to close the circuit. If we were to compare and contrast masculine versus feminine energy, and I need to give a disclaimer, when I say masculine versus feminine energy, I don't mean men versus women, male, female, exclusively. Everyone has masculine and feminine energy. Everyone. The 10 sfirot, the Zah, Chesed, Gvur, Tifer, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut, Netzach, Hod, Yesod are considered to be the masculine part. Malchut is the feminine. Within each one, there's masculine and feminine dimensions. Here's the point. The masculine energy is one of trying to control a situation, trying to figure it out, trying to control it. I got this. Jerry Seinfeld says that every guy thinks he's a superhero. You have a guy with a mattress on top of his roof. It's tied. The car, right? He's driving on the highway, going 70 miles an hour. He's got a mattress on there. Tied down with rope and twine and bungee cords. And he's got his window open, he's driving, and his arm is holding it also. What's going through his mind? If all of those straps break 70 miles an hour, I've got 4 fingers on it, I got this. I got this. It's not going anywhere. Every guy is a superhero, right? It's like, he doesn't need a map, for sure not. For sure not. Now the excuse of guys is the GPS is already built in. I'm not asking. It's just telling me where to go. I would never ask. No, but guys, again, it's not male, female exclusively. The masculine energy is one of control, is one of it's domineering, it's controlling, it's
very here and now.
Yeah, and it's tight. Whereas the feminine energy is more open and listening and curious. And yes, guys can do all of the above, can listen and be curious and huh?
It's just, it's variations within all of us.
Yeah, for sure. Right. And I want to emphasize that it's not male, female. It is different energies. So sometimes you need to assert. Sometimes you say, this is the way it is. That would be a masculine energy. Sometimes you need to be curious and ask questions and listen. That would be a feminine energy. Both men and women need both and have both and do both. But in Kabbalah, to distinguish between these two modalities, one is called masculine, one's called feminine. This is the way it is. Masculine, feminine. Right. There's a lot, right.
Or do you think it's also?
I would definitely say, so Sam's question is, when it says in the Torah that God created Adam, and then it says male and female, he created them. So does that mean, like our tradition, that they were two, the male and the female, back to back, and then God pulled out the obazah and like cut and separated them, which we do, that it is in our tradition? Or does it mean male and female, he created them, that Adam had both masculine and feminine qualities? I would say that too. That's another way of understanding it. That's very much consistent with the way Kabbalah explains it. So here's the point. The point is we all have masculine and feminine qualities. Which is going to get us, which is going to channel intuition? The masculine or the feminine? What do you think? Feminine. Boom. Which is why we call it a women's intuition. It doesn't mean women are according to Kabbalah, it doesn't mean that women are the only one with intuition. But it means that intuition is a feminine quality, because intuition means that you're not telling yourself, I know it, I got it, I figured it out. Because when you tell yourself that, you're less likely to be open to something beyond your own head. Whereas intuition is the ability to let go, where the mind lets go and says, you know what, I'm open to the possibilities. Show me what you got. Chaya, Yechida, show me what you got. I'm open. I don't have the answers. Asking questions. It's being curious. In relationships, it would be listening. Listening. In other words, what is listening? Listening means I'm open to a perspective that I currently don't have. How often do we listen to only for the sake of waiting our turn to then tell the other person how we think? That's usually what listening is. Right? Usually listening is, oh, you're all right, now I'm going to jump in, right? Boom, I got this. Let me tell you how I think. Whereas real listening, what we call today in psychology active listening means I'm really creating space. Really creating space. In Kabbalah, creating space is a feminine energy, feminine quality that men and women have. Again, I know, like quadrupling down on this explanation of that, it's everyone has this, but that's a feminine energy quality that is a key component to channeling, to allowing that intuition, that vision of the soul to drip down into our conscious mind. If our mind is tight, is working, is overactive, is thinking, then we're not open to the vision. When we relax a little bit, we relax the brain, and we could do physical tools, but it's really a space, an energy of being. When we're in that space, we're more likely to have that intuition. So what's the point of all the above? The point of all the above is that there is incredible power in when we're in the mode of receptivity, there is incredible power. When we're in the mode of giving, we're very much limited to what we have. When we're in the mode of receiving, the possibilities are endless. Does that make sense? When we're in the mode of giving, well, you only give what you have. So if you're giving, then whatever's in your head is in your head, and that's it. You're not gonna. But when we're in the mode of receiving, now that's where the magic happens. That's why Kabbalah explains the earth grows. It is spawns growth. You plant a seed in the earth, and then it grows. Why? The earth is open to receive. That's why biologically, women, right, create life. Why? Again, this openness, this feminine, this openness is this receptivity is what allows for something that is beyond the miracle of life. That is what allows for that to happen. And in a similar vein, as we've been explaining in this discourse, the power of speech. When it comes to communication, there are ideas, and then there are letters, the language in which contain the idea. The letters, the words right? The letters of communication, the literal letters of communication, the language itself are the vessels of receiving. They are the feminine energy. The ideas themselves, this is the idea, but then the words, the language is that feminine energy. And that is what creates growth of an idea. When you take an idea, it's a very masculine process. You take an idea and I'm going to share it. Before you share it, you put it into words, before you communicate it. That act of taking this and putting it into words actually generates new growth of the idea so that you understand it even more than you understood it before, which explains the phenomenon that we're all familiar with. You have an idea in your head and you start explaining it to somebody else, like a Torah idea or whatever. And mitamo, while you're speaking, you suddenly have flashes of insight that your mind didn't know before. Where's it coming from? So Kabbalah says, you know where it's coming from? Because the letters, not the idea is limited. The idea is masculine, squeezed. When you take the idea and you put it into letters, letters are open. Letters can handle any idea. Language, you can put any idea, any feeling. The letters are open possibilities. You take an idea, you put it into letters. The letters themselves, the receptivity of the letters stirs new ideas. It's like planting a seed. You don't get just a bigger seed. Imagine you put a seed into the ground and out came a massive seed. You're like, I got scammed. I don't want a seed. I want a big seed. You want a tree with fruit, something radically greater than the little seed that you put in the ground. It's all related. But here's the big idea. When you take an idea, take an idea and you put it into language, and then it expands. What created the expansion? The idea? No, he says the letters, the language, the openness. The openness of the letters themselves, of the modality, the methods of communication, that itself created the growth. Let's do this inside. Where are we up to? That itself is a good question. We are up to, oh, it's so interesting. He gets into the nitty-gritty based on Kabbalah of where the letters of language come from. Where the letters of language come from. We are on page 44. But I may want to, we'll start from 44. Reason and delight. Okay, I'm going to pull this up on our screen. Give me a quick momento. Uno momento, por favor. Okay, page 44, where it says reason and delight. Okay, so in our text, by the way, everything that I'm telling you is basically in this text. I'm just using non-exclusively Kabbalistic language to make it a little bit easier to understand. All right, so what we said up until now is that there are a few opinions as to where the letters of speech come from. Some say it comes from Chachma Stima. Some say it comes from a beyond Chachma Stima. These are basically spiritual dimensions within the soul that are transcending Chachma intelligence itself. As we'll see here in this section called Reason and Delight, it talks about two levels of Keter, or within the soul, which the crown within the soul, which are the transcendent dimensions of the soul, which are essentially the Chai and Yechida that I spoke about before. So Reason and Delight, here we go. For the external aspect of Keter is the category of will, while its inner aspect is delight. Delight is related to Chachma. So pleasure. I'm going to change delight to pleasure. Pleasure feels good, not emotionally, but on a deeper level. Pleasure. So there's will and there's pleasure. By the way, those two work hand in hand. What you want, will, is typically driven by pleasure. What you know feels good, right? So you want pleasure. Pleasure drives will. Not always are we aware consciously of the connection, because these are dimensions that are higher than our consciousness. So sometimes we find ourselves doing things that make no sense to someone else. Someone's like, why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense. And the answer is, I want to. Why do you want to? Because internally there's a understanding, beyond understanding, that is related to pleasure. So you have the external aspect of Keter as will, the internal aspect is delight. Delight is related to Chachma, as demonstrated by the two definitions of the Hebrew word ta'am. Tam is a Hebrew word, and it means two things. A, reason or intelligence, as in following the advice of the king and his elders, which is the mitam hamelech uzken of tam, tamim. Tam means a reason. And B, the second definition of tam is taste or delight, as in time uru kitev Hashem, taste and see that God is good. This is because reason and delight, or intelligence and pleasure, are interrelated. Therefore, the tamim, which are the trup, the musical notes, are at times rooted in chachma and at times in keter. This is getting very Kabbalistic, but Kabbalah speaks about where the various dimensions of the Hebrew in Torah comes from. So if you look in footnote, it's very hard to see. It's like really the fine print over here. If you look in footnote 114, on page 44 on the right side of the page, the musical notes, also known as trup, that the reader follows when reading the Torah, that is called the ta'amim. They represent the highest level of the four aspects of the letters. Ta'amim, chachma, nukudot, the vowels are bina, tagin, the crowns on top of the letters, shin, tes, nun, zayin, gimel, and tzadik are zerampin, za, and otiot, the letters themselves, are malchut. Only the latter two actually appear in the Torah, i.e. the letters and their crowns, whereas the former two transcend revelation. They are above writing. You don't put the vowels, and you don't put the ta'amim, you don't put the trup, the musical notes either. And according to Kabbalah, each of these four dimensions represents different elements within a person's soul and within the cosmic realms. The lower two are within our consciousness, and the higher two are super rational and super consciousness, and thus they're not written in an explicit way. The point is that we have this, I'm sorry, I'm stuck in the Hebrew over here, that we have these two definitions of tam. Tam means intelligence, reason, rationale. It's the head, but it also means pleasure. There's a connection between what we know and the pleasure that we experience. Let's continue. Consequently, this level, the source of the letters, is called seichel kadmon, which means primordial seichel, primordial intelligence. But in fact, it far transcends chachma, which is conscious intelligence, and even chachma stima, which is the source of conscious intelligence. It is from this level that the letters stem. The point is that ideas stem from chachma, intelligence. And what about the letters of language? The letters themselves, they far transcend ideas because they're open. They're like, it's like the code. It's like you can code anything with those letters. It's the code. It transcends a particular idea. It transcends the world of ideas. It's related to the highest level of keter, which is the highest dimension of the soul. Let's continue. In a general sense, I like what he says here, by the way. In a general sense, you know what that means? After all the nitty-gritty of Kabbalah, we're trying to map it. Keter, Ratzon, Tainug, Sechel Kadmon, Chachma Stima. We have all these Kabbalistic terms. And now he's like, like now, just generally speaking, here's where he makes it, or here's where he simplifies it. And this is, I read the other two paragraphs because we were up to there, but this is like, that's high level stuff. This is now speaking to us. In a general sense, the letters stem from the essence of the soul, which transcends the faculty of intellect. In other words, using the language that I said before, the letters stem from chaya and yechida, which are above nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Letters. Ideas stem from nefesh, from your brain. But the letters of language stem from beyond the conscious levels of the soul, the essence of the soul transcending the faculty of intellect. On account of their primordial root, as we've discussed before, the letters cause the light of the intellect to clothe itself in words of speech. In other words, it's almost like, since the letters are so open and are so connected to something higher, the ideas are drawn into language. We're excited to speak, to share our ideas and feelings. We're excited to move ideas into language. However, in the initial emanation of the intellect's light to become enclosed in the words of speech, before the letters are actualized, before one speaks. In other words, when initially the idea comes into the language of speech, only an external, page 45, radiance of the koach hamaskil, of the source of ideas, is drawn down to be clothed in the letters of speech. This is true despite the fact that this revelation is caused by the letters, which are the ones that draw the light. So even though the letters, due to their power, their lofty source, are drawing ideas into them. Ideas we think of as higher than language, but no, we're flipping the table. Language is higher than ideas, and because of that, ideas are drawn into language because of the power of language, because of the openness of language. But when they're initially drawn down, the ideas are still stuck within themselves. But when the letters are actualized, meaning when the intellectual concept is actually articulated, the essence of their core power acts to elicit even the depth and essence of the koch HaMaskil. In other words, the letters compel even the depth and essence of the light that transcends revelation to be drawn forth and revealed. In simple terms, what he's saying is, that's why when we speak, we start to understand more than what we understood in our own heads before. You could be sitting in a room, contemplating an idea, and in your head, it's like, okay, I understand it. And then you walk into the next room and you teach a bunch of fifth graders. And when you're done with that class, you will know it better. Every time. Or you have an emotion, love or otherwise, in your own heart. And then you speak with the person that's the subject, the object, whatever, the other, of your love or otherwise. When you're done with that conversation, the emotions will be bigger than when you started. Where does that come from? He's cracking the code of this. He's saying, you know where it comes from? The power of the letters. Power of the letters. What does that mean? Power of the letters. How do the letters have power? Because the idea or the emotion, the idea is limited, but the letters are open. The letters are touching on the infinite openness and expanse. When you take an idea and put into letters, the letters trigger something greater than the idea. Now you can see things and understand things that the mind didn't know before. It opens up understanding because you're channeling something higher through the letters that seem to be lower, but the power of receptivity touches the highest power, and now you have trickle down of more ideas than you had before. You feel it more, you know it more. Hence, let's continue, 45 in the middle. Through speech, one apprehends the depth of the intellect. When you speak, now you get the depth of the idea, which cannot be grasped through the mind's exploration alone. Similarly, with regard to the service of prayer, when you daven, saying the words of prayer causes the inner meaning of the words to illuminate the soul with the dimension of the essential light of the infinite, and the soul becomes elated beyond the excitement caused by the intellect and prior meditation. You can meditate on the words of davening, before you pray. But when you actually say the words, that opens up to a completely different dimension. This is because the root of the letters transcends even the root of the emotions, as will be explained. 100%. 100%. That's what he's saying. Next, in the parentheses, we're going to do 2 more paragraphs regarding the fact that the voice stimulates concentration in a manner of desire of the heart. We say that it's the voice itself. When you speak the words of davening loudly, that itself stimulates concentration, not the letters, but the voice. So we must say that is because Zer Ampin is one with and dependent on Atik. Oh, he explains it Kabbalistically. Nevertheless, the primary achievement takes place when the voice takes the form of speech, which is the substance and body of the letters, as explained above. He says, because there's also power to the voice, but the power of the voice is really when it's tethered to language, because the letters of speech are really what have the power. And final paragraph, and this is how we started today's class and the theme of today's class, and thus we are going to read this. This is the meaning of the statement. I believe it's from the Talmud. Where's this from? Bina Yisera. Yeah, Talmud. Additional Bina was granted woman, surpassing that of the man. So in the Talmud, it kind of gender delineates it. But the way we understand it is, it says women are given additional Bina. What's Bina? Intuition.
I thought it was understanding.
Understanding, but not in a way of understanding here. It means an understanding on a higher level understanding, an intuitive understanding, an understanding that's not limited. You're right, Bina is typically understanding, but here it means an understanding on a higher level, on a deeper level, right? Speech is called woman. I don't like this translation, receptacle. It means that which is open to receive. As is written in the Zohar on the verse, come to me from Lebanon, O bride. The Zohar explains it. Speech is endowed with additional understanding more than that of the intellect and emotions, as explained above. And thus we conclude today's reading. And so here's the point. Here's the big idea. The additional Bina that's granted women, surpassing that of man, means that it's the feminine capacity to understand and perceive more things than the masculine energy. Why? Because when you're approaching life from a masculine perspective, I know it, I feel it, I got it. The feminine perspective, and again, it's not male, female. The feminine perspective is I'm open, I'm curious, I'm receptive. It's like letters. The difference between ideas and letters, we're talking ideas and letters. What are ideas and letters? Ideas, the idea, it's stuck. The letters, open possibilities. The letters are like, you have those games where you get a bunch of letters, you can form Scrabble. It's a good name for it. Okay. Scrabble. You have a bunch of letters, now you can create. The letters in Scrabble are open-ended. In other words, there's this openness. And because it's open, the possibilities, they're not literally endless, but conceptually they're endless. You give someone a word, you give someone an idea, stuck. You give someone letters, you give them building blocks. Now it's open. So the relationship between ideas and letters is the same relationship between things that are stuck, things that are open, between a path and a possibility. I don't know path if is the right word, but like between something that's stuck and something that is a possibility. This is the feminine energy. This is the energy of Malchut. This is the energy of speech. This is why letters have so much power. This is why you had an idea and then you put it into letters. Now your idea is so much greater. Why? Because your idea was stuck. In your head it was stuck. But then you put it into, then you connected it with something that has open possibilities. And the next thing you know, it triggered all of this entire universe of knowing. So to me, the takeaway from today is the power of the soul beyond what we know. We should never limit ourselves to what we know, because that's a fierce limitation. Never limit yourself to what you think, to what you know. Be open to the possibilities, be curious, and share your ideas with others. Listen to what they say, be open to sharing yours, be vulnerable. That's all part of the learning experience, all part of the growth experience, and it generates the greatest wisdom and intuition, a wisdom and intuition higher than what we know. Thank you very much for joining me today for Kabbalah Cafe. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it resonated. It makes sense. Absolutely.
Okay. My mother, may she live and be well till 120.
Amen.
While I was in college or when I had my children or whatever, if I called her up and I said, "Oh, I'm not feeling well," she'd say, "I knew it. I told Daddy something is going on with you." And
I think a lot of the moms can relate to this, right?
she was,
Yeah.
is that part of this?
It's hard to say in any given scenario, like mapping it out, like, okay, this means that. I'm not, I don't know that I can say definitively, but I do think that when it comes to deep relationships, where you do have this love and openness for the other, that there's some information that you can just sense. That is, that you can't explain. It's like two people that are thinking about each other and pick up the phone, you call someone, it's like, "I was just thinking about you."
Yeah.
Where does that come from? I don't know. These are things you can't really explain. Even, I wish we had some like Tzvi Freeman in the room, because I was talking with him about this the other day, where you have two atoms, molecules, particles, electrons, somethings that are in different areas. But when you move one or when you affect one, the other one gets affected or knows about it. Could be far away. Right. What's it called? Quantum. Yeah, it's all quantum. Yeah, it's like, so one affects how? The point is, there's a lot more out there than what we like think we know. The problem is we think we know. No, we need to think. I'm not debunking that.
Have you heard of the book Linked by Malcolm Gladwell?
I've heard of it. I don't think I've read it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's very much about what you've talked about.
Really?
That the whole premise of the book is that we actually in our subconscious know things way before they come to the surface.
This is it. But we
That's-
block it.
It's an excellent book.
Yeah. I should look at that. The idea of not getting in the way. Being open to that. We know so much more than we know we know. Shh.
Isn't that
Powerful.
kind of
He said he told it to his teachers all the time. I know way more than you think I know. You think I only know this? No, I know way more. I'm just not telling you.
Wouldn't that be kind of overstimulation? I mean, if we should be aware, I mean, we would like explode.
Like I said before, if we knew pleasure. Thank you. If we knew everything, if our brains were aware of everything that we saw, it would be too much.
Yeah.
But it's about opening up a little bit. Just opening up a little bit, even for a moment. By the way, this gets back to what we're saying. When we sleep, our minds relax. I forgot to make that connection before. When we sleep, our brains relax. And that's why we're more likely to see visions and prophecies and premonitions. I'm not saying we're guaranteed to see that, but we're more likely. You and I, most people are more likely to have some sort of vision, whatever that means, whatever that looks like, when we're sleeping than when we're awake. Why? Because when we're awake, we're like forcing it. Like our brains are tight. We're squeezing our brains to figure stuff out. The more you figure something out, the less you're relaxed and open. When we sleep, our minds are.
Many great discoveries. Or we couldn't figure it out. They'll relax, they'll sleep. And all of a sudden they get this aha moment. That
Aha moment.
Just came out of nowhere.
Exactly.
Suddenly they were walking. Not even thinking about it. Focus.
You just reminded me of a teaching in Jewish sources. The same thing. It says when you're struggling with to study the Talmud, you can't figure out something. You're studying, go to sleep on it. And oftentimes the answer,
Yeah.
you wake up, you're like, oh, I got it. I got it.
My husband does that a lot. He's got a situation.
Yeah, you hear the expression sleep on it, right? What does
Very
sleep on
good
it?
at Me, not so much.
Not so much.
This was also a big part of the drug culture. And
Right.
Altered states of consciousness, either going to a shaman,
Right.
in an Indian tent or smoking something.
Ayahuasca. Yeah.
And arriving at the truth or whatever.
Opening up the mind.
I'm wondering whether all this is emanated, begun with.
I think it's connected. But I will say, there was somebody who asked the Rabbi about LSD. Is it kosher? Not physically, not actually kosher, but is it kosher? Is it recommended? This was back in the 60s when Timothy Leary. So there was a Chabad rabbi who started getting involved in this. And he felt like this was the breakthrough. Right. People are stuck, and LSD is going to be what brings Chassidus and Kabbalah and what really transforms. And the Rebbe, Zalman Schachter, Zalman Schachter, yeah. He was very heavily.
Talking about
Which one?
substances to open.
Oh, Karbach? No. They were friends. They were very good friends. Karbach went to music, and Zalman Schachter went to LSD. I mean, famously, this is not a secret. This is not Lashon Hara. This is he was very much promoting.
Sensory deprivation. That was also another big field.
To turn off the senses, right?
These tanks and.
Yeah, people still do that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Actually, mikveh is part of that. Yes, mikveh is you submerge totally. There is a bit of sensory deprivation there under the water, which is about kind of resetting with something. There is some element of that to that. But anyway, getting back to LSD, the Rebbe was not in agreement that was the path, because essentially that is a shortcut. But aside from the potential dangers, I'm outside of my field right now of expertise, but aside from the potential pitfalls, the idea is that would be a shortcut as opposed to working. So anything that could be done through avoda, through work, that you're taking a shortcut for. So it's not really you, even if you're opened up, but it's not you that opened up. It's the substance that opened you up.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not. So what happens if you don't take the substance? Then you're closed again. Better to work on yourself to be a more open person. So it's organic as opposed to impose from some sort of substance. So that's a little bit about that. Kabbalah of drugs. We should do that. We should do that.
So
We should bring in a shaman and we should like get together and, by the way, microdosing now, like mushroom, like that's my psilocybin. Yeah, it's a whole thing. There's a psilocybin rabbi in Denver. Legit, look it up. Psilocybin rabbi. Look it up. By the way, he was facing charges in Colorado because even though a lot of stuff is legal, but that stuff wasn't legal. And he had
a lab.
maybe he did. But he was basically doing it, come to services, and that was the service. It was like all integrated with the service. You found them? Okay. Psilocybin, but it's with a bunch of PSs. It's a mushroom. Magic mushroom. It's a hallucinogen. Anyway, that's a davening to remember. But anyway, so basically they had charges, but then just now in November, Colorado legalized them. And so they dropped the charges. How did I see it? I was on Facebook. I don't not that often on social, but I was on Facebook and somehow it popped up like the fact that he was exonerated. They just dropped the charges against him. And there you go. You said he is in Denver DA drops psilocybin charges against Rabbi Ben Gorelick, December 8th, 2022. Yeah, a month ago, 2 months ago.
So what's the part that's
I'm not advocating for this, by the way. I'm just oh, he's not he's not Chabad. He's I don't know. You have to see what he calls himself. Yeah.
What's the microdosing component?
I don't know. I've heard that word microdosing, and I've heard like CEOs are it's taking like a small amount to just relax you. I don't know why I'm like deep breathing. I don't know why, but I don't know if they do that. But like it's a smaller amount. It's not like knocking yourself out, but it's like I don't know. I'm like outside of my I'm speaking about whatever. So I've heard. So I've heard.
So slow trip.
It would be easier to daven. It would be easier to daven. By the way, there might be an elephant in the room, so I'll just address it, even if it's not. By a Farbrengen, if you've been to a Farbrengen, you've probably noticed, as per my joke earlier, right, that there's oftentimes a little mashka. What's mashka? Mashka is liquor. Yeah. And the stated purpose of that is to open you up a little bit. So the question's been asked. So why is that okay as a substance and not this? I don't have an answer for this. The only answer I have is because in Russia, they had that and they didn't have that.
Yeah, but it could be just a question of legality.
Also for sure, question of legality. I was literally having a conversation with somebody Thursday night about this back and forth. They said, and then I said legality, what you just said, and they said, but what about during Prohibition? I mean, Chabad wasn't in the U.S. during Prohibition, so don't ask me about what Farbrengens looked like during Prohibition, because they were in Russia where there was no Prohibition. I don't have a good answer. Why would alcohol be as an external substance, right, to help just open the conversation a little bit of Farbrengen and not other than either stigma or illegality or Russia versus today? I don't know.
Well, Rabbi, I
Yes.
think it might be that it's the legality aspect, because I mean, many of the academic medical centers have been researching psilocybins for the past at least 3 years. And there have been, publications in real medical journals showing that there is a certain amount of efficaciousness in these in people with severe depression that haven't responded to anything else.
Yeah.
And so if you start looking at the ethics of that someone's so depressed that God forbid they decide not to be here anymore, and this intervention allows them to open up enough to see a different path and not do that. And I think it's probably been legality and safety. And now that it's being researched out like that, I mean, who knows? Maybe in a couple of years, it'll become in the same league with alcohol. And, many would argue that the side effects of psilocybins are less than the side effects of alcohol.
Right. And it's so funny because we were speaking about this Thursday night, and somebody who's a med student, it's not a doctor, but a med student, was saying how the latest clinical trials are saying that one dose of the right stuff can actually completely get rid of the clinical depression stuff. It's crazy. I'm not vouching for myself. This is what somebody told me.
About psilocybin.
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but even one controlled whatever dose hit something of that. So I mean, I think what you're saying is that we should start planning for Mishnah and mushrooms. That's
God doesn't forbid psychotropic drugs, and that's opening up people's truth.
I don't know. I think it's an interesting conversation. I don't know enough to personally comment on it. I just know that it hasn't been part of the culture, probably because of the illegality of it. I don't know what the future will hold. I don't know. We'll see.
But you always say, don't say l'chaim to drink.
Right.
Drink to say l'chaim.
Oh, good. It would have to be in a very specific and mindful way, and not just, to go on but same thing with l'chaim. You don't say l'chaim just to drink. Chassidus don't drink. Say l'chaim. And then of course you throw it down. But it's not about the drinking, it's about the
Not about it.
spirituality and psilocybins. I don't drink that much either. Whatever. I mean, it's other than water. I don't even drink coffee. I can't drink coffee.
Why it's good for you.
My heart races
Wow.
and I get sweaty. Saying ease myself into it. My microdose coffee. Maybe I'll start. I don't know. All right. Maybe. A few times when I've had coffee, it's like I can't think.
Have you tried?
My brain.
I'm just curious if there's decaf.
I don't think I've tried decaf, but maybe.
A little, because it doesn't taste the same.
You know, it's gonna be.
I have coffee ice cream. That's that's the closest I get.
Hot tea.
I drink tea only.
If there's caffeine.
I know. I don't drink only non. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's mental.
I think so. No, it's
caffeine.
physiological. I don't know that it's meant.
Does coffee tend to have more caffeine than tea? I think it does.
Tea can have more.
It could have more. I've seen that. That's why I don't understand what's going on. Maybe there's something else in the.
I think it's the
The
levels of
coffee.
caffeine.
Maybe it's the. They have something
the tannic.
tannics.
But the tannic acid's in tea.
Yeah.
Tea has tannins, not coffee.
I feel like I'm so pale. I could use some tannic or whatever. All right. We'll see you guys. Take care. Have a great week.
Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Shavuot
Bye,
Tov. Thank
Pleasure.
you.
Pleasure. Great to see you guys.